Hello, and welcome to another episode of I Just Want to Be Included. My name is Veronica Olson, and today you will meet my friend Erika. We will talk about being a parent to kids who have come out with a different gender identity than what they were assigned to at birth, and how we have helped them transition. I know this is a difficult topic for people. You may not like or agree with what you hear on this podcast, and that's okay. The goal of this podcast is to bring humanity to difficult topics. People who are struggling with their gender or sexual identity are human beings. They have friends and family who love them. There's no place for hate, making others' lives difficult, or dehumanizing people. We are called to love one another and be patient with one another. As always, I ask that you listen with an open heart and mind and have some compassion. Anything said in this podcast is based on personal thoughts, feelings, and experiences. Everyone is different. Every situation is different. Nothing said should be taken as professional advice. Please always look in your community for help to deal with whatever issues you or your child might be facing. Enjoy the episode. So today we have Erika, who is Alex's mother, and I'm very excited to have her on. Alex has spent the last 2 episodes talking to us about his transition and things from his perspective. So today we're going to get a perspective from a parent. And Erika and I have known each other a long time.
Yes.
We've known our kids a long time.
Yes.
And I remember you were the first parent I connected with after I found out my child was going through a gender identity crisis.
Oh, really? I didn't know
Yes. And so to find another parent who was dealing with similar things with name changes and clothing was like, oh my gosh, it was huge.
Yeah.
To find another parent because, and this was during COVID, so I felt totally isolated. And I had people to talk to, but nobody who was going through the exact same thing.
Right. Right. And it makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
Because unless someone's going through it, it's really hard to, people can empathize, but it helps tremendously when someone's going through the same thing, especially because for me anyway, initially, I don't feel this way anymore, but initially there was a sense of, there's a sense of at least a perceived fear of judgment.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And so if someone's not going through it, even if they're not judging you, it's easy to perceive that they will.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And so it was tremendously, helpful for me to connect with you on that too. I hadn't connected really with anyone else that I knew.
Right.
Regarding that. I had joined a few parent groups,
yeah,
that sort of thing, but that's it.
Yeah.
So yeah, this was tremendously helpful.
Yeah. So talk about kind of from your perspective, when you found out that this was an issue for Alex, kind of, when he stated, I think I'm transgender, or I think I have, or not really a problem, but an issue with gender. When did that kind of come out to you?
Well, it was pretty cut and dried because what had happened was Alex had some sort of a mental health crisis.
Mm-hmm.
And issues with depression, anxiety, and had spent a brief period of time in an inpatient facility. Okay. And had been in an inpatient facility for about 10 days because he had a pretty bad depressive episode, and all of the health professionals involved thought he might benefit from an inpatient stay.
Okay.
So he did that. And then it was just a couple of days after he came home, and I remember it really well. He had gone to a friend's and they went swimming, and I had picked him up from a friend's house, and we were in the car driving home, and he told me that he was having like body dysphoria.
Okay.
Specifically like around his chest where he said the bathing suit was bothering him.
Right.
And he was having a lot of dysphoria.
Yeah.
And then I said, oh, and he said, I think that he didn't say trans at the time.
Right.
He said, I'm having a lot of gender dysphoria and I don't think I'm female.
Okay. And how old was he at this point?
He was 14.
Okay.
Right.
And so my child was 16. And one of my first thoughts was, you're really young to be making these declarations.
Yes.
Did you have that thought too? It's like, I hear you and I understand you, but do you really want to declare everything you're declaring right now at this age?
Well, yes. And also, prior to that, about 2 years prior to that, Alex had come out as gay.
Okay.
So, that progression, we had dealt with that and that was fine. And and at that point, being 12, even with that part of it, I thought, and my initial reaction was, okay, but let's just wait and see how things go because you're 12.
Yeah.
And, and then about 6 months later, and then we didn't really talk about it for a while. And then about 6 months later, it's, became more clear, and it was pretty clear. And then Alex had a whole, relationship with a female, but at that point and all the way through those couple years, there was never any indication from him that he was transgender.
Okay.
He certainly was very plugged into that world, online and was very well aware of all the different combinations and permutations of people's sexual orientation and sexual identity that existed.
Yeah.
And so, and he had a lot of friends in the LGBTQ community and with various, gender identities and sexual preference identities.
Yeah.
But, and I remember once even having a conversation with him, asking him if he thought that, like, maybe a year after he came out as gay. And, he said, no, I don't think so. So part of, honestly, part of my reaction when he first announced this, especially after having just been in this inpatient facility for 10 days, was I was a little bit skeptical.
Okay.
Internally.
Yeah.
Just because on the one hand, it certainly could make sense that, these feelings could have been helping to fuel some of the depression, anxiety, struggling he'd been having. On the other hand, I was concerned that it was that's not the right word, that it was an answer that was easy to grab onto as an explanation.
Yeah.
And that Alex was maybe seeking that.
Yeah.
Seeking a concrete, well, this is it. Aha.
Right.
As a black and white, easy solution for feelings that maybe he didn't understand.
Right.
And so, but I didn't say any of that.
Oh, yeah.
Which I'm very happy that I didn't. And it was hard.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't. I was just like, okay. I was very accepting. Because I was accepting. I did accept it. I had no problem with it whatsoever if it was true. What I was concerned about for his well-being, like you said, with your child, you're young, you're not seeing the long-term consequences. And I don't even know what the long-term consequences are. This is a whole brave new world for all of us.
Yes, absolutely.
So it's really hard to predict how things are going to unfold. And so I just said, okay. And when he first told me he said he wasn't sure if he's non-binary or, trans male.
Okay.
But that only lasted a few days.
Okay.
Then after that, he's, was definitely saying he's trans male. And that's when he said he wants to be Alex.
Okay.
For, for a couple of days, he had a different name that was more gender neutral. And then he, wanted to be Alex, which is fine.
Right.
And so, and then really it never wavered after that. And the longer it didn't waver, the more comfortable I became with it.
Right.
Because for me, it made me more confident that this is who he is. And this is him moving in this direction he's not going to regret it later. That was my concern at first. Yeah. And of course I didn't know a lot about the transgender issue at all at that point. So I did a lot of research and, as there is a lot of negative messaging about it,
Right.
or messaging out there from quote unquote experts that say that it's a psychological problem.
Yeah.
If you support this, it's really almost child abuse.
Yeah.
It's a part of a propaganda campaign by the medical industry, and folks that are, so there was a lot of that, but I quickly kind of dismissed that.
Yeah.
Because it did not ring true with my kid.
Right. And one thing that, and I've told this to people over and over again, is, when you find that out about your child, very quickly, you're like, okay, what do I do to keep them safe?
Exactly.
Alex had dealt with depression, anxiety. My child had as well. And so very quickly, those other things kind of like go off the table, because you immediately go to, I need to keep you safe. I want to keep you part of the family. How do we do that? And that's my starting point.
Right. Absolutely. Because, and that was my concern. And really what was difficult for me, I would say, in the first few months, was the idea of, what do I do to keep him safe? In the sense that outwardly to him, my instinct was to be supportive and do nothing and say nothing to negate it for him.
Right.
Which I'm really glad about. And that turned out, I think, to be the right instinct. But inwardly, and based on my research, I was trying to figure out if that's really the thing that's going to keep him safe.
Yeah.
And I concluded that it was. And I believe that wholeheartedly. Yeah. And I also came to the conclusion that, even if this isn't something that he wants forever, so what?
Right.
This is what he wants now.
Yeah.
And he has a right to want this.
Yeah.
And this is not, it will be damaging to not support this.
To like ignore it.
Right.
Which we're going to talk about later, because another fun topic for me is, isn't this a phase?
Well, yes. Yes, absolutely.
Maybe, I don't know, but I've got to deal with the here and now.
Exactly. And if it is a phase, then it is.
Yeah.
And I have such irritation about that whole argument, because even if it is a phase, it's happening to them now, and it's real for them. It's not a fabricated feeling.
Right. And
if it is a fabricated feeling, which at least for my kid, I don't think it is, then so what? The harm of, if you put yourself as a parent in a position of like a detective, where you're trying to figure out, okay, is this just a phase? Are they just saying this because it's popular with their friend group?
Right.
So what? Let's say they are, and you support that. The consequences of that will be they will pursue this until they don't feel like pursuing it anymore, like with every other phase in life.
Right.
And then they will stop pursuing it.
Yeah.
The consequences of you being wrong about that is like,
they're huge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And not just, beyond the obvious, death, suicidal tendencies, severe depression. It's just damaging to your and theirs relationship.
Yes. Yep. Absolutely. So once Alex kind of told you what he was feeling, when did you start bringing other people, like other family members? And I know this story probably plays out differently in your scenario because you are divorced. So Alex has like a step or a dad and a stepmom and a whole separate family.
Right.
But from your perspective, like, when did you start thinking, all right, I need to tell grandma, or I need to tell, other people?
Well, it was dicey.
Yeah.
Because along with wanting to protect Alex and have him be comfortable with it, there was this sense of this, we're going to support this, but this may or may not be a permanent thing.
Yeah.
And so I have to admit, there was a worry on my part about making this big announcement and then 3 months later making a different announcement. Like I had to get over like my own worries about being judged.
Yeah.
Personally and as a family.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. And, anticipating the sort of eye roll, like, oh, well, what's he today? That kind of thing. And it took me a little bit, but I just had to get over that. And it was actually very freeing.
Yeah,
once
it is. It took me several months.
Listen, this is my life.
Yeah.
And if you can't be there by my, supporting me on that, if you're going to judge that, then you don't fit in my life anymore.
Right.
And that's that.
Yeah.
But I initially was worried about losing people or having this create a rift, a sense of judgment.
Yeah.
And so initially, just our immediate family knew. Although I do know the other thing is that Alex, I believe, was out right away on social media that I really had no idea how to even access.
I was like the last person to know.
Right. So that whole concept, that whole point was a little bit moot because, people that follow him and other kids, and then some parents followed him. So really, there was oftentimes many people that I didn't think knew that knew.
Yeah.
But that's okay. True to style, what ended up happening, though, was that Alex wrote a book.
Right.
And he wrote a book, and he wrote it under his, with his new name as, Alex, even describing himself as a trans kid. And I knew that he was doing that, and I was fine with that. But then he published it.
Right. Surprise.
And I didn't know that he was he was publishing that. He did it on Amazon Publishing, which is fine. And then he sent it to everybody that, hey, I published this book.
Right.
And so that's pretty much how everybody found out. And I have to admit, I was not thrilled that they put me in an awkward position with a few people, but that only, not that anybody reached out to me in a negative way, but I just, I felt awkward that there were some people in the family, especially those in older generations, that were getting this and had no idea. The first way they found out about this is that he's publishing this book and this is him.
Yeah.
So there were a few people that I messaged privately.
Right.
And just said, hey, I really, and people were supporting Alex. The reason he was publishing it was because he was selling the book.
Go Alex.
He wanted people, to buy it on Amazon for whatever it was, $12 or whatever it was. And people did, which was really nice. But the people that did, and certain people I did message and say, hey, I really appreciate your support for Alex's book. I just, I said something along the lines of, Alex is now Alex, and this has been a relatively new thing, and I'm thrilled for him on this new journey.
Yeah.
It wasn't my intention that this be the first you heard of this, or something like that, but this is how it's worked out, and so I appreciate your support. It was something along that line, you know, and people were nice coming back, and so it was fine. But for a while, I still have had personal issues with it from my perspective. Not with Alex being trans, but with other people finding out that Alex is trans. People that, not that I don't want them to find out, but more that my life, this has become a very regular part of the fabric of my life. Right. And then seeing people or connecting with people that I haven't in many years, and realizing, oh, I need to come out again, kind of. Yeah. And that has brought some, negative feelings for me. Yeah. I would say anxiety, not anxiety, that's not the right word, but just an uncomfortable feeling. Yeah. But, recently it's happened twice where I've reconnected with people that I haven't talked to in a while. Mm-hmm. And first of all, one person that I didn't realize knew, that I had this conversation. Oh, I should tell you that my former child is now known as Alex, right, etc. And she was like, oh yeah, I knew, because apparently, the book, I didn't realize how many people the book announcement went to. And it was totally I'm like, okay, cool. And then there were people that, there was people that I worked with years ago when at a different job. And at the time I was pregnant with my twins, and then I had the twins and they were babies. And then that job, I left that job when they were about 2.5. Okay. So everybody remembered the girls. How are the girls? 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 It's so hard when I get that question. Yeah. Because it's do I just say, oh, fine? or do I explain it or whatever? But at
Yeah.
this particular, it was a retirement party for someone that was retiring, and everybody that I talked to, I told.
Yeah.
And and there were a couple people there who I still follow on social media who I didn't, based on some of their other posts,
Right.
I didn't think that they would be particularly accepting. And to my face, they absolutely were.
Okay.
So, and it really doesn't matter to me, like,
right,
what they think or don't think. It's just in that social capacity, it was awkward, and I didn't know if I would feel comfortable reconnecting with them or not.
Yeah. And I don't know if you've had this experience, but when I am with people who I'm not normally with, whether that's strangers, family members, friends, whatever category, I kind of play it by ear, to be honest.
Me too.
There are times when I am full disclosure, this is what's going on. And then there are times when I'm like, this just does not seem to be the right time or place. And
Right.
we're not going to do it. Not because I'm ashamed. It just,
it's a personal thing that takes a lot of explanation.
yes.
And well, it doesn't have to take a lot of explanation, but I feel sometimes that it takes a little bit of explanation.
Yeah, for sure.
And yes, you don't want to bring it up. But I've definitely been there before. But now, and it's so ingrained in me now, I refer to Alex, I refer to him as him, because that's who he is.
Yep.
And for people that is strange to, most of the time, if they pick that up, I explain it.
Yeah.
If they don't,
imagine saying they and really getting crossed eyes.
And that is difficult. That's particularly difficult.
Yeah, because people are like, why are you saying they?
Right, because then it's like a confusion. It's not as obvious. Like, I think for many people, especially of our generation, they confuse it with just that you're speaking of like plural,
multiple people. Yeah.
And so then, it doesn't even hit them that it's a gender thing.
Right. Yeah. And I've also found that I set the tone for how people respond.
That's a good point.
So, and it took me a long time to get there. I'll be honest. It took me at least a year, probably, to find the right words. But once I found the words to tell people, this is what my child's dealing with, this is what non-binary means, this is how I'm approaching it. Once I kind of just laid it out that way, I found that people were very accepting, and there really wasn't room for judgment. But it took a while for me to get to a point where I understand this as much as I'm going to anyway.
Right.
And I'm somewhat comfortable, and I can speak to this. My confidence made a huge difference in how I talk to other people, because I wasn't embarrassed or shy or, looking for sympathy. Or apologetic. Yeah.
And I will say I don't think I've ever spoken about it in an apologetic way. Although it took me a little while to get over the idea that somehow in the back of people's mind, they're going to be thinking, like, well, what did you do?
Yeah.
Like, as a parent.
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
And that's why I would make that joke, because I happen to have twins. I would make that joke. Hey, listen, I gave them exactly the same food.
They have the same life.
Right. But when I realistically, that's funny, but that is a response to a judgment. Yeah. That somehow, this is an issue. This is a parenting issue in some way.
Right.
And as a parent, that has been hard for me to reconcile. But I'm totally there.
It's a process. It's
as I learn more about it, and especially with Alex, as I see how this is just quintessentially who he is.
Yeah.
And just learning in general that as parents, for all kinds of issues, I think we talked once before, and I mentioned something I had seen, this analysis of, you're the shepherd, you're not the engineer.
Right.
And I think there's a lot of pressure on parents in this, especially social media age, where there's to just like that you are so absolutely responsible for every minutia detail of how your kid is.
Yeah.
Because that you have so much power to manipulate that. Yeah. And that is just not
no true. One's ever had that in the history of the world.
Right. Exactly. So, that's been, so in many ways, this whole experience with Alex has helped me just as a parent in general.
Yeah, absolutely.
And moving on toward just realizing that my kids are people, their own people, and my job is to, you know, support and love and like sort of mentor them, but
Right.
that only goes so far.
Yeah.
And most of what they are and who they are is not about me.
Right.
And that's true. I think every parent needs to realize that. And
that was my
gets to a point
mantra
where you
for
have
at
to.
least a year. This is not about me. This is not about me. This is not about me. I can't take all of this personal because it's not.
Right. No.
And you want to take it personal. When they reject their birth name, you want to take that personal.
Well, yes, absolutely.
But I had to tell myself that over and over and over again.
Right. Because it's right. Exactly. And it's hard to do that. When there's all this messaging that's saying, this is, like there was some stories, some messaging and some anecdotes, like about, for example, some teen, a female was, and it's particularly, there's messaging, I'm sure you've seen it, particularly aimed at assigned female at birth children transitioning to male or non-binary.
Yeah.
That's supposedly the true craze that
right.
in typical, I would think.
Yeah.
And I find it how ironic that even in transgender issues, somehow the assigned females are more to blame.
Of course. That's a good point, Erika. It's our fault no matter what. It doesn't matter what it is.
But even almost the trans females, in other words, assigned male at birth who transition to female. Well, that's okay. That's just an anomaly of human existence.
Right.
But the assigned female at birth that want to transition to male, that's your parents' fault.
Yeah.
Or that's society's fault, because that's a craze, and the kids all hang out together, and then all of a sudden they want to. And one of the anecdotes was, the parents just, when they're a 12-year-old girl told them that they were non-binary or wanted to be male, they just, they were hanging out with a lot of other kids that were in that vein as well, and they just spent more time with her and played board games and went canoeing, and lo and behold, a year later, suddenly that wasn't so important to her anymore.
Yeah.
And she met a young man who was giving her attention, and now that whole, it's just, and
yeah.
Here's the thing, I don't deny that was their experience.
Yeah.
But it doesn't change my experience.
Right.
And it doesn't negate it.
You know? And I'm very tired of social media being blamed for everything.
Right.
Adults created social media.
Absolutely.
Put it on laptops and phones, handed it to our children.
Right. Right. That's true.
I am so tired of that being to blame. People will, that's where they always go. Well, social media. I'm like, I don't have the energy to go into that. But
right.
And it doesn't matter. People look for something to blame. Like, it doesn't matter. Blaming something or someone else does me no good. That is not helpful to me as a parent when I'm trying to help and support my child.
Right. And actually, it's interesting, when we're talking about blame, because in talking about blame, that implies that this transition, that it's a negative thing.
Right.
And I honestly don't see it that way.
Yeah.
But it is a challenge to help keep your kids safe through it.
So after Alex had come out to you, when you started looking at, okay, how do I help him? What kind of professional help does he need? Where did you go? What was your first instinct at that point?
Well, initially, because his transgender journey started pretty close after he left the inpatient facility, we had already been connected in the facility with it was suggested that he have DBT therapy, dialectical behavioral therapy, which is a style of therapy that has been shown to be really helpful with depression,
right,
and particularly like harmful thoughts, that kind of self-harm, thoughts of self-harm, etc. So we got connected with Ann Arbor DBT, which is a center that does that. So we started that right away. And it was during COVID, so it was always over Zoom, but it was Alex responded to it really well.
Okay.
And he participated well, which was good.
Yeah, you have to have that for it to be
right,
effective.
exactly, and he did. And so we were doing that. So initially we just did that because they suggested that he not do other therapy while he was doing DBT.
Okay.
But and so and as part of this DBT program, there were group sessions for both the kids and the parents.
Oh, helpful.
Along with they assigned an individual therapist for Alex.
Okay.
Who Alex saw regularly. Now that person obviously, by the time we signed up for the DBT, Alex had come out as transgender. So I talked about the fact that he's transgender, and so we need somebody that can help him with that.
Right.
And also take that into account. So this person apparently did. I never really met the person. I mean, Alex had the sessions with him, but Alex liked him.
Okay.
And his primary focus was to teach the DBT skills.
Yeah.
But I think that helped Alex in general. By the time, that's one thing in particular about Alex never seemed to waver.
Yeah.
Like he didn't seem to have, like, that I was aware of anyway. I'm sure he did some issues with how do I do this?
Yeah.
Like, how do I become trans?
The day in and day out of
right. I mean, there were challenges
living.
Certainly, and he struggled with gender dysphoria.
Yeah.
But he didn't honestly initially, I think, have much counseling that was aimed at that. That was aimed at, okay, well, if you're feeling this way, why don't you try doing this? Like Alex, through, I'm sure, internet research, etc. I mean, he researched it himself, and I just sort of followed his lead as far as how does first he cut his hair real short.
He told us that story.
Yeah. And then, and actually he cut his hair before he came out. And he's, if I remember correctly, he said that helped him realize, because when he did that, he felt so much better.
Yeah.
But then, and then he just started changing the way he dressed. And I tried to help him with that. The goal became to, he wanted to look, masculine as possible. So, I researched and I ordered binders for him right away.
Yep.
And, so I was doing research on there's safety issues sometimes with binders. Mm-hmm. And so I found the places and ordered that. And then he and I started talking a little bit about ways that he could dress that would make him feel comfortable and look more masculine.
Yeah.
So we kind of came up with this style where, like, a bottom, like pants or shorts, and a tighter t-shirt over the binder, and then like an open shirt over that kind of helped, like, because he had gender dysphoria, like around his hips and things like that look, and then over time he, kind of started taking over that. But certainly in the beginning, there was still issues with that, and I would try to help. And sometimes what I tried, he didn't feel was helpful.
Right.
But overall, he was always really good about telling me, this is not helping me, and when he would tell me that, I would try to be like, okay, what?
Yeah.
Sometimes I would be frustrated with it. I'd be like, well, what is that? What can I get? Because I just bought like $700 worth of clothes.
Well, and as a parent, you're looking at the resources you have, right? You're looking at online stores, box stores, places like you can go. But then this child's like, well, I don't want that. Or for us, it was, I want to go shop in the men's department. I understand.
But that's not going to fit.
You have a female body.
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to be an act of frustration for you to do that. Well, that's not fair. I get it. I'm just telling you the reality that we're all living in.
Right.
So it was a lot of those discussions too about, I don't care how you dress, but the reality of taking your body and walking into Macy's men's department is not realistic. That's not going to help you from my perspective.
Right. And so, and there was some of that. And also sometimes where there would be, and I learned, I think I made some mistakes, but I learned, is that there had been a few times where I would say something to Alex and it would make him feel more dysphoric. And I didn't mean to, but I was trying to help. Mostly it would come around this. He wants to look masculine. He does X, Y, or Z that he thinks makes him look masculine, and I don't think it makes him look masculine. So, like, and me trying to kind of be torn between, do I just let him go with how he's comfortable, Or do I gently tell him, hey, I think this has more of a look? And occasionally I would get that wrong.
Yeah.
But sometimes I would get it right. Like sometimes he liked the suggestion.
Yeah.
It's the same issue I think that anybody has with their kid. Like, hey, do I tell my kid that this doesn't really look that good on them?
Right.
Or do they care? Is it that they don't know or that they don't care? Like,
yeah.
Because there's that, hey, it's a hard thing for a parent always,
Yeah. And one thing I really learned about my non-binary child was the fear of rejection was very deep and very real. And so I had to be very careful what I said, because
they felt rejected by you.
Not by me, but just rejected by everybody else in the world. And I was constantly having to I love you, accept you, I'm here to help you. I don't know what I'm doing either,
right?
But I'm trying,
Right.
But that fear of rejection was rooted so deep, it would come out at me. And I don't think it was personal. I just think I was a safe,
yes,
a safety net.
It's hard not to take that personally. It's really hard. Yes. And there was some of that, but as we progress now a few years now, I just, at this point, he knows what he wants or doesn't want. And I have much less input in it.
Right.
And so then along that vein, so it was probably, he was 14. It was October of 2020. He might have already been 15.
Okay.
I'm trying to think because, so it was around October of 2020 when he came out as trans. So at that point, no, he was 14. He was 14 because they would have turned 14 in July. Okay. So he's 14. So then about we went through all the way through COVID and everything. And then I just kind of followed his lead. And then about a year or so later, I'd have to think about the dates, we started talking about wanting to get gender affirming medical care.
Right.
We didn't do that for a while.
Yeah.
And he didn't really bring it up too much.
Okay.
But then when he was ready, he was saying he wanted to start hormone therapy. And by that point, I completely supported it.
Yeah.
Because by then it had been well over a year that he, and we had kind of always been thinking, a lot of things I had been reading and, they had kind of targeting 16, when he turned 16.
Yep.
Well, as it turned out, we ended up doing a little bit early. We contacted University of Michigan. They have a pediatric endocrinology. That's where you start.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, it was a year before I could get him in to even get an appointment with somebody there.
Wow.
So I did some more research, and I happened to come upon this practice in Ypsi called Corner Health. And they're a primary care practice that specializes in humans between the ages of 12 and 25.
Okay.
And they were known for having a lot of gender affirming care. And I contacted them and they were able to get him in, and their doctors there work out of St. Joe's and U of M.
Oh, nice.
And they consult with them, but they're not part of those. So anyway, we were able to get him a consult, and then they were able to put him on, hormones within a couple months.
Okay.
So that was, I get that by the time we did that, it was 2022, it was April of 2022. So it's been a little over a year now that he's been on hormone therapy, and it's been great. I mean, it made him happy. It made, I think it's been absolutely the right thing for him.
Yeah. And one thing that people have told me after my child had made some of those changes, so the physical, the hair and the clothes, I would hear, that's the happiest I've ever seen them.
Yes.
They seem so comfortable with themselves.
Right.
I've never seen them look like that. I had that coming from different areas. And so that was kind of affirming to me that, because when you're in it, you don't always see it, right?
Absolutely.
And so for someone else to say, you know what? I have not seen them look that happy in a long time. It's okay. So this is okay. It's not easy, but if other people are seeing that, then that's a good sign.
Right. And by the time we were getting ready, when we found out that it was going to take a year to get in at U of M, I mean, Alex was devastated and upset. And, and I just, I wanted to get that for him as soon as we could, which is why I did that research to find Corner Health, and I'm very grateful for it. They're a great practice, and they're close by. I mean, it was like amazing. I mean, I think I did some kind of search like gender affirming care for teens in Michigan or something like that. And I ended up on some kind of, it was through like a website, like an LGBTQ positive website of some kind. I can't remember how I got there, but there was a list of like 8 places, and Corner Health was one of them. And it was like one of the only ones nearby on that list, you know?
Yeah.
So anyway, it was good. So that's been, and that's been, and they're a really good practice. So I feel really, they monitor him. They, there's blood work that needs to be done to monitor it, and that's all happening.
They don't just give you the hormones and say good luck.
Right. And at that point, they also understood that he'd already been transgender for well over a year and had therapy. Yeah. That's sometimes one of the requirements.
Yeah.
There's a lot of hoops you have to jump through in order to, but Alex was ready and they did that. So,
and that's one thing I want people to understand too, that when they hear about kids who have gone through hormone therapy or some kind of transition,
yes,
this is not something that's happened overnight. It's taking months, if not years, to get to that point. Right. And it's not an overnight decision by anybody.
No.
Whether it's a parent, the kid, or the doctor.
No. And there is a movement that that is, basically, I think, against this kind of existence.
Yeah.
Plus the care that supports it, that wants to make it seem like, oh, your kid comes home from 3rd grade and says they wanted to, your little girl comes home from 3rd grade and wants to play with a Tonka truck, and you take her to the doctor the next day and get her a penis. I mean,
it's not how it goes. No,
it doesn't. That's not what's happening at all. And also, none of this could have happened for Alex without parental consent.
Yeah.
And that's another thing. The idea that teens are able to get, or younger children are able to get, gender affirming care, that the medical community is taking our children.
Right.
That's not happening. They can't do that without consent.
Right.
So are frustrating. And, I try to not, like, I've been very silent on Facebook about all that stuff for a while because I wasn't out as a transgender parent.
Yeah.
On Facebook, really. I mean, I wasn't, I'm not one that would be posting that, but I did get, somebody posted, it was a meme about, and it was basically like, I'm so thankful that, I can't remember, it was something about that when I went through my tomboy phase, my parents didn't, I can't remember what the word was, but something along the line of, they didn't, turn me into a male or make me stay a male. And it just hit me with that, it hit me with, that idea that somehow a child being transgender is the parent's fault.
Yeah.
And because you didn't respond correctly to their cues that they wanted to be more toward the gender that's opposite from their assigned at birth gender. And, this person's glad that they had a parent that was better than you, basically, that didn't, and it just, so.
Yeah,
anyway.
I hear that. Thank you for joining me today. And a big thank you to Erika for being willing to come on and share her story. I will continue my conversation with Erika next week. I hope you'll join us. Hang in there. We're all doing the best we can. Have a good week.